and welcome to Variation 32. Variation 32 combines two very different bowings. We have martelé, which requires a lot of weight on the string and therefore a lot of strength. And we have ricochet, which is a passive bowing. The bow bounces on its own. And the difficulty in this variation is the combination of the two because they follow so rapidly after each other. Let's take a look at the two bowings separately at first, because you have to be able to do each one separately before you can start putting them together. Typical for martelé is the clicking sound at the beginning of each note. You get that by catching the string. You catch the string, I'll show on an open D string because it's easier to see, by pressing down the stick, and you can tell you've caught the string if you can move it from side to side without making a sound. And as you start playing, you release. The release and the beginning of the note is one action. So practice catching the string and releasing, and then practice it in the rhythm you need for the variation. First in one note, and now you add the rhythm. And then you can practice that in scales. Practice that a lot because you have to be able to completely have mastered this and to be able to play this with ease, to be able to combine it with the ricochet. Ricochet is a passive bowing. The bow bounces on its own and we only direct it slightly. I go into how to learn ricochet in the variations 20, 25 and 26. So if this is new to you, I would strongly recommend you study those variations first before you work at this variation, because it's more difficult if you have to do martelé in between. I'll have the links in the description. Now ricochet is usually done either in the middle or in the upper half. In the middle one has a bit more control, it's stronger. Here we're supposed to do it in the upper half. So a good idea to practice it is to start in the middle where it's a little bit easier and a bit easier to control, and then move to the tip a little bit. It gets softer the further one goes to the tip, and it's louder the closer you are to the middle. So that's fairly far away from the middle already. Even further, one can't control it very well, and because the rhythmical precision in this variation and in this ricochet is so important, I would recommend to play it about here and not as indicated in the music right at the tip, because that's not controlled. It's not useful, it's not helpful. So I found it best to do it about here. But you'll have to try that out for yourself because that's slightly different with each bow. Now to put those two bowings together, I would again recommend to practice that on one note at first, and start off by giving yourself a lot of time in between the two bowings so that you can consciously switch from the strong martelé, which is on the string, to the passive ricochet, which is off the string. So give yourself plenty of time. It's also okay to repeat the ricochet a couple of times if it doesn't come off so well the first time. So a good idea to practice it at first is like this. Give yourself as much time as you need. It can even help to give yourself even more time. Concentrate completely on martelé. Now switch over to ricochet. Martelé, ricochet. The difficulty is that the bowings are so different from each other. That's what makes it hard. So make sure to give yourself plenty of time in between the two bowings at first. And then the next step is to gradually shorten the break. And then shorten the break until it's only the length of an eighth note. You can tell that's already a lot more difficult. So make sure to give yourself plenty of time beforehand. And if you notice that the ricochet is not coming off very well when you shorten the break to only 1/8 note, then go back to playing the ricochet twice or even 3 times. Very difficult. You could tell they didn't all come off that well. But I found playing the ricochet twice or 3 times was very helpful for this difficult variation. When you start practicing this variation, it's a good idea to also go about it by separating the martelé from the ricochet at first. So what I did a lot in the beginning was just the martelé a couple of times and then just the ricochet a couple of times. I did that until I was satisfied, or at least moderately satisfied, and then the ricochet. And then the martelé. Ricochet. Martelé. Ricochet. Work your way through the variation that way. Make sure you catch the string for each martelé note. Sometimes the danger is that one doesn't catch the string properly. That's not martelé. And then with the ricochet, sometimes the danger is that it doesn't come precisely. So make sure you really do have 4 notes and then 1 up bow. Work your way through the variation, concentrating just on the martelé, and then concentrating just on the ricochet, then the martelé, and then the ricochet again, because that helps a lot. It's a little bit tedious working your way through the variation that way, but it's well worth it. I don't think I would have been able to do it if I hadn't done that. Notice how the indicator dynamics of forte and piano come automatically, because the martelé is automatically loud. And ricochet is automatically not as loud, particularly if played in the upper half. Ricochet can never be as loud as martelé because the bow is not on the string long enough to create any kind of a big sound. So the dynamics happen automatically. Very important, when you play the ricochet, don't try to play it piano. The ricochet is piano on its own, and the martelé is forte on its own. So basically you get the dynamics for free in this variation, which is quite good because it really is a difficult one. I had a hard time with this variation. I wonder if anybody else has a really hard time with it, or if it's just me, so let me know in the comments. But anyway, I found this difficult. So the dynamics you get for free. The martelé is naturally loud and the ricochet is naturally soft. Don't make the mistake of trying to play the ricochet piano, because otherwise you get something like this, which one can't hear, it's not a projecting sound, so that's no help either. I spent a lot of time practicing this variation with a long break between the martelé and the ricochet, and then the ricochet 3 times. So I did a lot of this. Ricochet. Concentrate on ricochet. Martelé. Switch to ricochet. Martelé. Ricochet. I found that very, very helpful. The next step that I did was that I shortened the break. And I shortened the break until the break was only the length of an 8th note, but I still played the ricochet 3 times. I spent a lot of time practicing it that way. The next step was to only do the ricochet twice. And that was already a big step for me because suddenly the ricochet didn't work very well and nor did the martelé. And the next step, obviously, was just to play the ricochet once. Much more difficult. So give yourself plenty of times for the steps before, because that does enhance the chance of then being able to do what's written. Important is to get used to putting the bow straight back onto the string after the ricochet, so the bow is on the string to catch the string for the martelé. So particularly as you shorten the breaks between the two, this becomes very important. So you have, and then you put the bow onto the string again. Straight back onto the string. Straight back onto the string. Because if you come from above for the martelé, you won't be able to catch the string, it won't work. You won't be able to catch the string. The bow has to be on the string to be able to catch the string. So after you've done the ricochet up bow, you have to place the bow back onto the string. Now when you take a long break, that's fine. Put the bow on the string. Put the bow on the string. This gets very difficult when you shorten the break to only the length of an 8th note, which is why it's so important to only shorten the break very gradually. So you do have one action in between the ricochet and the martelé, and that action is placing the bow onto the string. So you have to be very conscious about that and don't shorten the break too soon before you can actually do that at the speed you need to be able to do it. But I think that is one of the main problems why I personally found this variation so difficult, because straight after the ricochet, which is so uncontrolled because it's a passive bowing, to immediately control the bow and to place it again at that speed, that I found very, very difficult. As from bar 17, the martelé is piano as well. To play the martelé piano, you still have to catch the string, otherwise it's not martelé, and then you just use less bow. That makes it softer. So if you have forte martelé, for the piano, same thing, you also catch the string, but you use less bow. Don't play the ricochet piano. The ricochet is piano on its own. So just leave the ricochet alone. As bow technically speaking, what I feel in my right hand when I play the martelé forte and the ricochet is piano on its own, it feels as if I'm playing everything forte because I don't change my dynamic for the ricochet. When I play the martelé piano, the ricochet is piano on its own, but I don't actively try to play it piano. So that actually feels as if I'm playing the martelé piano and the ricochet forte. So that's something which one really does have to know, because if you try to do the ricochet piano, like I explained earlier, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And we need a projecting sound and we need a precise rhythm for ricochet. So don't play the ricochet piano. And to play the martelé piano, same thing, catching the string, but use less bow. That will make it soft. Same catching string, just very little bow. What makes the ricochet difficult in general is that it is such a passive bowing. The bow does so much of it on its own that there's actually very little we can do to influence it. That's one of the things that makes this variation difficult. That's why one often feels very helpless when one plays ricochet, because one cannot do much more than just hope that it comes off and hope that one actually gets 4 notes on the down bow and not 3.5 or 5.5. So those are one of the things that I really battled with. There are a couple of things one can do to influence the ricochet. The one thing I already mentioned is where you do the ricochet, whether closer to the middle or closer to the tip. That changes a lot. The closer to the middle you are, the more control you have. The closer to the tip you are, the softer the ricochet gets and the less control you have. So you have... That's quite controlled, and here already much less controlled. So that's one way of influencing it. Another way of influencing the ricochet is from how high above from the string you come. That's particularly interesting when you're coming from martelé, which is a bowing which is completely on the string. So there's a difference if you go, if you're not very far away from the string. I found that was not helpful. It actually helped me a lot to come from quite far above, comparatively far above. You notice I take my bow quite far away from the string. I discovered that by accident, and I found that that was very helpful to actually come from quite far above for the ricochet. So I lifted about this high, which is very high if one thinks about the fact that one always tries to stay as close to the string as possible. Another thing which influences the ricochet, which can also help, is how much bow one uses, because ricochet can be very static in one place and it can have quite a lot of bow. I just showed you both extremes. As you could tell, neither of them worked out. So what you want is somewhere in between. But when you're working at the ricochet, play around with that as well. Do it a couple of times with hardly any bow, the bow almost jumping in on one place, and then with lots of bow, and then see that you can find the middle ground which works best for you. And that will also be different with each bow, because the weight distribution in the bow itself is different in each bow. No two bows are completely alike. So you have to try that out and find out what works best for you. It's the rapid change between the two extremes of martelé, which is not only on the string, but literally in the string because you're catching it, and ricochet, which is not just a bouncing bowing, but it's the most passive bouncing bowing that we have. And then immediately having to place the bow on the string again for the martelé. Those are the difficulties. I wasn't expecting to find this variation so difficult, because martelé is something I've been doing for a long time, ricochet is something I've been doing for a long time, but the putting together in tempo, that took me a long time. So let me know how you get on with this. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, but also how you get on. I would also be very interested in whether it was me that found this variation particularly difficult, or if other people also find it difficult. It'd be very interesting if I hear about people who say, no, this is not difficult at all, because that would make me really curious. So yeah, let me know how you get on with this variation in the comments, and enjoy practicing it.